because I mean this was the ANC's third worst province after the Western Cape and KwaZulu-Natal, and I mean it dropped in Gauteng more than it did nationally, which also tells you something because the drop nationally for the ANC was to a large degree because of MK. Uh, Obviously, MK did okay in Gauteng, but not nearly as well as it did, um, uh, in KwaZulu-Natal and so on. So yeah, the ANC is really on the back foot in Gauteng, and I don't know if Panyaza Lesufi's perhaps overplayed his hand. He's now formed a minority government. It can be quite hard to get anything done. I think he's going to have to be, on each budget and various legislation. So on, he's going to have to get either the DA or the EFF or MK to support him to get past. He's going to struggle to push back against motions of no confidence if the DA, MK, and EFF all decide to vote together. So politics makes for strange bedfellows, as the saying goes. So who knows if there might be some cooperation in the Gauteng legislature between MK, the DA, and the EFF. But I do think Panyaza Lesufi, from what I can tell, he did. There was quite bad faith efforts on his part. He was happy to get the DA support and having him voted in as premier, but then he wasn't prepared to give them the number of kind of portfolios they wanted. I think they wanted between 3 and 4, which I think 4 would probably be fair, especially, I mean, the ANC doesn't dominate Gauteng like it used to. I mean, in the 2000s, it was getting in the mid 60% of the vote in Gauteng, and now it's getting 35%. It's only 7 percentage points ahead of the DA. So there's not a big gap between the two parties. So yeah, I think the ANC did, or at least the ANC in Gauteng did negotiate in quite bad faith here, and might come haunt Panyaza Lesufi in the future.
Last week, we released our latest macro review focused on the public sector, trying to understand where exactly the money goes. So just in terms of the wider discussion around the GNU, I want to talk to both of you about public sector performance and reform. If you look at these salary bands, we had to take out 1 or 2 of these rows just to make sure it's sort of legible on a PowerPoint slide. The full table is available in that latest macro review that you can obtain on our website. But the bands number 7 here, especially if you look at the average salary, 327,000, number of employees around 306. In your senior management, maybe not as big, but it has grown over the last 10 years. Nicholas, you contributed and wrote for this particular macro review. Any thoughts that you want to highlight here, the challenges around public sector reform, the public sector wage bill? I think it's a big challenge for the new government.
Yeah, our public sector is not terribly efficient, and yet the sort of middle ranks of the public sector are quite large and are paid well compared to many people in the private sector. These are wages, I think, that most South Africans would be very happy to get a hold of. And these sort of middle bands of the public sector are where most of the costs come from. As you can see there, it's sort of, they match, there's about sort of half of the public services in those middle bands. And that's really where the expense of the government public wage bill comes in. There's a lot of focus on the top levels, which, do cost the taxpayer some amount of money. It's not negligible, but if you really actually want to reform the civil service, you have to look at ways of getting more value for money or reducing the size of those middle brackets of the civil service. And that is much more politically difficult for the ANC to do because, many of those people, I think, are quite supportive of them. But that's actually where the sort of the fat, so to speak, of government is in those middle ranks. And until you kind of rein that in, which, as I said, is politically difficult, you're going to make very little. You can do big, high-profile things, but our senior managers won't get this benefit or won't be getting this pay rise or something like that. But if you don't rein in those middle ranks in terms of spending, you are not going to get much benefit out of government.
Marius, to you, if you look at the quantity that South Africa spends on government services, on the public sector, we're ranked quite highly, according to figures from the National Treasury. Looking at our general government wage bill as a part of GDP, just behind Iceland and Denmark, they're at the top, our OECD average. and all the other countries. So yeah, this will upset a few, well, all libertarians, but I do think it's important to build some element of a capable state with the necessary levels of service delivery for citizens who can't afford private sector services, infrastructure projects where those are well targeted, industrial policy again where it's well targeted and has sunset clauses. But yeah, at the moment our trajectory is that we spend more on things like the public sector wage bill, but there isn't a commensurate positive impact in terms of service delivery your average South African's experience with the state. So maybe a great opportunity here for the new government, if they can turn around some of these elements, you improve again that relationship between the citizen and the state, which I think has broken down in some ways over the last year or two.
Yeah, I think we probably do have a bit of a bloated civil service, but the fact of the matter is that if we had to reduce the size of the civil service by 20 or 30%, it wouldn't really make much of a difference on South Africa's trajectory in two ways. A lot of those, we need the civil service to be more efficient, but if we had to cut a lot of people's, lot of people who work in the civil service, it wouldn't make much of a difference to South Africa's current fiscal trajectory. You know, if you got rid of, say, whatever, 20% of the civil service, there would be a drop in the ocean compared to what South Africa does spend on, you know, state spending and governmental spending and so on. So it's obviously something that needs to be reformed. But if we really want to get South Africa onto a kind of a sustainable fiscal path, it's, you know, and reforming the civil service, really tinkering at the edges. What South Africa needs is economic growth of 5%, 6%. You know, maybe that's actually a bit too high with what we currently have, but I mean, we should be looking at something like 3 or 4%. That's the only way we'll be getting South Africa onto a path of fiscal sustainability. It does seem that the current finance minister is quite committed to keeping South Africa on the current path, but yeah, a lot can still change, and we don't know what will happen in the 2027 ANC elective conference. President Ramaphosa is, I mean, he's effectively guaranteed to not stand as ANC president in 2027. So if we get somebody who's, you know, not as committed to fiscal sustainability and so on as President Ramaphosa and Ngwana in 2027, things could change quite quickly. So yeah, yeah, just to summarize, well, it's obviously important to reform the civil service. I think it won't make much difference overall to South Africa's current path.